Good morning. Thank you for joining us for the February installment of CECL Coffee Talk. Just a couple of reminders. My name is Sean O'Brien, I'm the president of QuickRate. And as always, I am pleased to be joined by Steve Huntington. Steve, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Sean. Morning, everybody. My name is Steve Huntington. I'm the Director of Analytics here at QuickRate. I've spent my entire career working with credit unions and community banks around the country, trying to help them with financial modeling and analytics. And I've been working with Sean for a little over a decade now to take those analytical tools and make them available to all you guys through QuickRate.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Steve is the primary architect of our CECLSolver. So as we've said on previous, he is the absolute right person to have on the call today. So again, just a couple of reminders why we're here. So our thought was we have, a lot of credit unions utilizing the CECLSolver tool. We know there still remains a lot of questions and concerns about, transitioning this. And as we looked into, forward to 2022, one of the things that we thought could be really helpful is hopefully, Dale, I just got a message you're not aren't able to hear us. I hope everyone else is able to hear us. I'm showing that I'm not muted. But we wanted to make sure that people, had an opportunity to bring questions forward, also to just address any concerns and issues that we know that many of you may had. And while we can do that in one-on-ones, we just thought essentially trying to create these coffee talks, or some ways a user group would allow our credit unions to have a way every month to make sure they're getting prepared for this. So okay, so just as a follow-up, I appreciate everybody letting me know they can hear me. That's very helpful. I appreciate that. And so we're going to move forward. So we're going to talk a little bit about the CECLSolver today. We know many of you on the call are first-time attendees. So Steve's going to touch on the CECLSolver. We're going to touch on some of the call report changes coming. We'll talk a little bit about Q factors. As always, we'll take your questions and comments and take those throughout the webinar or presentation and at the end. We'll also talk about what's coming in the future. And then just as a reminder, we are doing a little bit of a different format than a typical QuickRate webinar. So first and foremost, you are muted at the moment, but you can raise your hand and then I will be able to unmute you and you can ask your question aloud. If you prefer just to type in something either in the Q&A box or chat, as you've already seen, I'll be monitoring that throughout the presentation and taking those questions as quickly and as, keeping the flow of the presentation moving forward. But we'll be monitoring those and taking all of those and hopefully being able to address all of those in today's presentation. We will send out an email with a link to today's recording as well as a copy of the slide deck. So without further ado, we'll kind of just again kind of rehash what we're here for. It is an open forum. We think a good practice is to run parallel CECL with your incurred loss methodology. But again, we wanted to give you a way to bring questions forward and maybe again either get a question answered or even have potentially another credit union provide commentary as well. All right, so we're going to start with just a brief overview and introduction of the CECLSolver. And Steve, I'm going to let you take that.
Thanks, Sean. This is mostly for the benefit of those of you who haven't seen our tool in action yet. When you first log into our CECL tool, it comes preloaded with all of your historical financial data, as well as your peer groups, the entirety of your peer group's historical financial data. One of the strengths of a tool is that we utilize the WARM method, the weighted average remaining maturity methodology. We rely on pretty heavily in our tool. It's certainly one of the more straightforward approaches that's been vetted by the NCUA and examiners for CECL compliance for the majority of credit unions. And what you'll notice using our tool as comes pretty much with actionable results almost right off the bat. A handful of assumptions we need, or some inputs we need from you guys. But as we plug in assumptions and inputs into the tool, you'll notice it's very interactive in nature. It's in that everything recalculates on the fly as you adjust any input or assumption, which allows you, to build scenarios a lot more quickly, as opposed to having to build out an entire scenario with 1,000 assumptions and then wait for an output report and then build another scenario from scratch and then build that output report and then try to compare them and see what's moving the needle here, right? What changes did I made of the thousands of assumptions in there is really driving this different reserve level I'm looking at. That's not a concern with our tool, as you can tweak any individual number and then see everything recalculate and get an idea of what's really important for you guys and what's irrelevant given your situation. We start by plugging in some average remaining maturity calculations, which we help you ascertain what those are. And then the tool really is off and running, right? We use those remaining maturities to inform our look back periods for each segment of the portfolio. Then we calculate historical lifetime loss rates automatically. We then do the same thing, that whole historical analysis for your credit union. We also do it for every single other credit union in your peer group. So crunching just an absolute ton of that historical data so we can get some really good guidance on our qualitative factors, right? That's the second half of CECL. After we've analyzed our own history in detail, then it's all about how do we modify that, right? Through Q factors, both internal and external in nature, to get our best estimate of what we expect losses to be moving forward. And so we provide, we're not here to tell you what your Q factor adjustments should be. We're here to provide the best, most apples to apples comparable segment level data to support whatever assumptions you want to make about your qualitative factor adjustments, so we can get a reserve that makes sense for you and is going to be acceptable from your examiners. We also have an area, a module for the individually assessed loans, so you can tackle that within this framework. We've added recently some more granularity to our qualitative factors tab, so you can individually plug in each of your different qualitative factors, internal and external. We also provide a bunch of economic data. We've recently added some of the different Fred data trends that we have as part of the Q factor package. And we have a little module for unfunded commitments to help you tackle that part of it, because that's kind of brand spanking new for credit unions under CECL, and on the call reports is managing the an estimate for losses for the unfunded commitments. Next slide. And then just briefly to remind you or to introduce you to how you'd manage the tool. Whenever you build a scenario here, you can make notes for each segment of the portfolio as to what's going on. You save scenarios. You can have as many scenarios as you want saved, so that becomes a repository of all your scenarios as over time as we move towards the implementation date. You can export the tool as much or as little of it as you want to with a single click. PDF export, Excel-based export, it's up to you. And it's easy to sort of toggle between peer groups and have all the peer data recalculate on the fly. So it's pretty intuitive, we hope, to manage the tool and get those different scenarios over time and make notes on it. You can run the tool as often as you see fit. You're not limited to doing it on a quarterly basis. You can run it as of any date with a couple updates. It'll be as of that point in time. And we have a bunch of resources that we add in there to help you along your way: a visual user guide, a methodology guide, some implementation documents, an Excel-based template to help you calculate those average remaining maturities. If you can't get any relief from your ALM or your core in doing that, which is not surprising and pretty typical, then we'll help you get those WARMs and justify them so you can use them with the methodology. Sean?
Okay.
So yes, so this is new even for all of you current users, everyone on the call who's already uses our tool, our CECL tool. As of just yesterday, you now have a lot more data and analysis that you can do, no additional charge or anything like that. But we wanted you to be able to look at some basic credit union financials. And so now you'll notice it's kind of a redesigned homepage for the CECL tool, which allows you to also click on your credit union and see historical summary financials for your credit union. Look at mapping and branch level data on your credit union or any other credit union in the country. You can actually search for any credit union in the country and pull up these summary financials. You can look at them over long periods of time, over recent short periods of time, on a MRQ or a YTD basis, however you want to do it. And of course, you can always export these things as well. Next slide. And then this is just one other tool that we just added the other day as well. It allows you to it's what we call credit union universe at a glance, right? You can kind of sort by different geographies and just get a feel for what kind of credit unions are in your neck of the woods and have some, profitability, asset quality, yields and costs, balance sheet, and other financials at your fingertips that you can sort of play with and export this, into an Excel environment or print it off if you'd like to. So we just felt like we had the data, and so we'd like to give it back to you guys more so than just for CECL purposes. Sean, anything else to add there?
Yeah, no, I would just echo what Steve was saying. Again, I think one of the things that we're going to try to continue to do is just build more functionality for you. As Steve mentioned on this, page, you can go see yourself or any other credit union in the country. You can see information annually or quarterly. Everything you can print, you can create a PDF, export to Excel or PowerPoint. And then, again, here you can sort by state, a region. You can link to any of the credit unions that you see. You can sort any of the columns that you'll be able to see. So it's just a reference tool, kind of a preliminary step for us to try to, take that first step in just building out more information for you, in addition to the CECLSolver that we're providing you.
So that's already available for every credit union who has access to our CECL tool. As of yesterday, has access to all this.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So one question we've been getting a lot, especially that's been ramping up over the last couple months, and certainly after the NCUA did kind of an all hands on deck webinar, was that a couple weeks ago, to all the changes to the 5300 call reports. I am not going to attempt to go through all of the changes to the call reports as of March 31st. The vast majority of them do not pertain specifically to CECL. There are changes throughout the call reports. They are significant. It's the most significant updates or changes to the call reports that I've ever seen in my life on the bank side or the credit union side. So I've never even seen one like this for the FDIC form, form 041s and whatnot. But let's talk about those changes that are specific, that are really going to affect CECL. Not just, typical other methodologies, but also our tool specifically. And rest assured that by the time you guys have all filed your first quarter call report at the end of April, that all the new segmentation and new historical data for the new call reports will be integrated and live on our CECL tool by the time that everyone has filed. Next slide. So just some notes about the changes. Again, starting, we filed our last old call report. The next one is going to have all these changes in it. So all of our asset quality data, right? Our delinquent loans by age of delinquency and all of our losses and recovery data goes instantaneously from 9 total segments on the portfolio that are additive to with an all other loans bucket that is a bit of a catch-all bucket that we don't really love, and we know a lot of our users aren't a huge fan of, to 20 distinct categories that are kind of separated between commercial and non-commercial subcategories. Almost all of the memo item segmentation goes away completely. So if you remember on page 9, where you've got losses and recoveries, or losses and recoveries, and then the delinquencies, and you have 9 additive segments, and then you have 20 memo items below that. Those memo items that are included and above, they all go away, except for I think total participation loans and total indirect loans. But the segmentation changes are kind of a continuation or an escalation of the changes they started making back in 2017, 2018 with the member business rules, where they started capturing some more commercial lending practices in detail on the 5300s. We've noticed it's this reconfiguring is really starting to align your credit union call reports much more closely with the way we typically see from the commercial banks that filed the 041s with the FDIC. Again, the biggest challenge from a CECL perspective here is, again, with CECL, we're supposed to be estimating long-term losses on each segment of the portfolio and using as our baseline our long-term historical trends, right? So we're going back in time a bunch of years to establish what kind of historical loss experience we've had in each segment, find some trends, and then extrapolate them out of the future. But now if we're going to have 20 segments of the portfolio, the vast majority of which are brand new, we won't have perfectly apples to apples historical loss trends, right, on segments that didn't exist until this quarter. So that's certainly going to be the biggest challenge that we have to deal with. So we get a question a lot, are these changes, are they a good thing? Are all these changes to the 5300 a good thing for CECL implementation? I'm sure how the vast majority of you on the call would answer that question, because you're the ones that have to deal with filling out the call reports and changing your accounting to do so. But in the long run, I do believe it's going to be a positive thing from a CECL perspective, because we'll have some better detail and granularity on our loan segmentation, so that when we try to keep our loans pooled with similar risk characteristic loans, we have more pools that are going to have good data. Unfortunately, that good data only starts this next quarter. So for a transitional period for a while, it's going to present a lot of short-term challenges, but I believe in the long run, it'll lead to some better CECL implementation. Next slide. So this is just a snapshot. The existing call report, when it comes to losses and recoveries, there's those 9 categories on the left. Now there's memo items down below it, but those are the 9 additive categories for the whole portfolio. The new one, as you can see, is going to have 20. You notice all the red is brand new, meaning all of those segments, charge-offs, recoveries, past dues for all those segments that are in red is all completely new data that has not been captured in the call reports the same way in the past as it will be in the future. So a lot to contend with. Next slide.
Hold on one second, Steve.
Sure.
Allow Lisa to ask her question. Lisa, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? I think you have to unmute, and then I think you'll be able to. Okay. All right. Well, we'll come back to you, Lisa, if you've got it to, or you can submit it in the Q&A or the chat as well. All right, Steve.
Sure. Oh yeah, the next slide. So it's not just the charge off and loss. You know, at first glance, you might think it's not a big deal for CECL, because when you look at just your loan portfolio earlier on in the call report, there aren't very many changes to the segmentation on the loan detail. But unfortunately, we need that same segmentation for your loss data in order, and that's what really drives the whole process. So you can see this is a snapshot of the new delinquent loans and lease page. Not only is all the red there are all brand new fields. So 80% of this entire part of the call report is pretty much new. And not only did they change the segmentation, but the buckets for how many days delinquent the loans are, I can't tell you why, but they decided to change that as well. So now you got 30 to 59, 60 to 89. So we have the whole 60 to 89 days of delinquency duration. That's new across the board. It's a new call report field ID for every single category of loans, even the ones that we've always had on the books. So it is a pretty drastic overhaul of the asset quality part of the call report. And rest assured, we're working diligently to make sure that our tool captures that moving forward. And we're also working with the NCUA specifically to try to help get the best data mapping we can, so we can have some long-term trends, even though we're getting a lot of new categorization. Next slide.
All right, Steve, a couple of questions. One, I'm going to go back to Lisa. Lisa, hopefully, if you want to try to ask your question again. I don't think I can hear it.
Oh, she said she didn't want to.
Oh, got it. There was also a question, Steve, a couple other questions here.
Sure.
Which page is on the call report? Are you referencing to section 2? Do you know those?
Delinquent loans is that page 8 on the call report? And then the losses are page 9, or it's either 7 and 8 or 8 and 9, where you detail by category all of your delinquent loans by segment. And then on the page after that is where you have losses and recoveries by segment.
Then we had a question. We're looking at a potential merger effective 1/1/23 as a CECLSolver user. Would we be able to access the credit union being acquired using your tool prior to 1/1/23? So I think the question is could you see their information? So I think we can work with you to get that access. So Brett, if you want to, you could just reach out to me offline and we can work on getting you that access.
Yeah, it's not something that we've built a lot of functionality around by default because most people don't care to run CECL on anybody but themselves. But obviously this is a situation where you have another institution that will be part of yourself moving forward. And so we'll build a solution for you to help you manage that.
Yeah, and then just, I think always in those kinds of situations, I think it's always mindful, most importantly, their information will be helpful, but, ultimately it'll still be your kind of credit culture that moves forward. So, I would think that you'll want to continue to bake in, your expectations just on obviously a much larger portfolio now.
Just foreshadowing how that might work for anyone who's curious about, because we get questions a lot. It's a good question, honestly, about how do we take into account mergers or historical mergers, right? Where we just, we used to have as a potential accounting methodology was pooling. And so you actually would combine historical information from institutions, but we don't really do that in the merger world anymore with acquisition accounting and whatnot. So how do we look at old historical data that doesn't have that other bank or credit union in it? And then the answer typically is what Sean was just alluding to, right? You're projecting forward using your credit culture, right? There's a reason you acquired them and not the other way around. So yes, they might have had some different historical loss rates than you did, but are those as appropriate to use, equally appropriate, to use to yours? I would say probably not. You're going to be integrating those loans into your underwriting standards, your credit culture, and then growth on the combined institution will follow your business model as well. So while you'd certainly want to look at the acquired institution's historical trends and take that into account, maybe via Q factors or whatnot, doing a true historical combination of the two institutions treats them both equally. And I don't think that that's appropriate from a CECL projection standpoint. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yes.
Okay.
And then just a question came in, regarding the new sections in 12 through 20. What if you've never had losses in those items? You obviously have no historical data. I think that's what Steve's alluding to a little bit, right? Is we'll be kind of building that data going forward, but also that's where your Q factors will come into play, right? If you are in the fortunate position to not having, losses in particular categories and you want to substantiate a reserve, you can kind of that through the Q factors. Steve,
yeah, you certainly won't have any historical losses on segments that didn't exist until now, right? We're all going to be dealing with that. So that's the mapping that I'm working on, that our team is working on right now, to say, all right, you didn't have this exact segment in the past. Which segment that did exist in the past is most similar? And then we can use that historical trend as a guideline that we can then modify via Q factors to get. It's all about taking the data that exists and making reasonable assumptions and being able to defend them. So that's the process we're going through now so we can provide that.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so got another question here. Let me jump in. Oh, great, thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you for the question. All right, so again, I think probably the single biggest question we get repeatedly, are around the subjective nature of both the incurred loss methodology and CECL, and that's the Q factors. And so, I think we're going to talk about this today. We're also going to invite on an auditing firm, an accounting firm next month to share their thoughts on this. So, you know, again, we're going to come at this from our opinions today. And then, like I said, we'll bring in other experts to share their thoughts on it, because we've continued to speak to a number of different firms about how to best approach this, you know, and how they think credit unions should handle it. So, you know, obviously there's some differences in CECL and the incurred loss, right? CECL is looking at losses over a much longer term approach. It's those lifetime losses. That's why we use the WARM, so we can see that longer period of time. CECL incorporated and introduced a forward-looking component, right? Not waiting until there's a probable loss. And then obviously the one area that theoretically the concept of impairment was supposed to go away with the new standard. So in practice, you know, what are we seeing, right? You know, we're still seeing, you know, the ability in some instances to separate out from the pools, but the Q factors are not a new concept, right? This is really the area where you get to decide beyond the quantitative data, you know, what do you think will impact, you know, your portfolio now in the future? I think we've heard a lot about the economic forecasting piece of this, right? Really, to me, the Q factors are where you kind of incorporate this in. You look at your current assessment of things, and you can also, if you want, incorporate a forward-looking change or component to it. So a lot to build on from what you've been doing in the past. And again, I think we're just gonna, you know, take the good and then just modify it or tweak it, you know, for CECL. And I think that will get us all to the finish line. You know, we often get the question, you know, like what factors, right? The, you know, FASB, you know, had laid out, or the agencies had laid out a while back, you know, just common factors to consider, you know, as Q factors, right? And I suspect many of you, if not all of you, are using some combination of this today in the incurred loss model. And I think that it'll be appropriate, you know, moving forward too. And so, you know, again, just, you know, changes in policies, changes in conditions, changes in the makeup of the portfolio, lending teams and management, concentrations, et cetera, et cetera. So utilizing those, you know, as best you can, or building on those, we're happy to discuss those with you. But I think, you know, again, not trying to be overly precise, but just, you know, kind of looking at a base set of conditions, you know, that again, might impact your portfolio. We think, you know, utilizing your Q factors and building upon them is really a great way to go, because you've invested in your process. And not only have you invested in your process, so has your board, your auditors, your regulators. So there's a comfort level that we do not want to go away from, right? We just simply want to build upon that with a forward-looking factor to kind of capture the economic forecast, or just that forecasted piece of CECL. I don't think we need to overthink it. Again, you ultimately know what's going to impact your portfolio. And so again, I think we take what we've been doing, we add a little bit, and and then we recalibrate those, you know, to the new pools that we have in CECL. Just a reminder, Q factors are used to kind of reflect or quantify that risk that you don't see captured by the historical loss data. And it allows you to alter your assumptions beyond that quantitative position or portion, right? You know, perhaps you had losses in the past, but you've taken steps to build up or, you know, beef up your underwriting standards, or you've changed your underwriting standards. Any of those types of things are reasons why you could, you know, alter or impact, you know, your Q factors. I think when we talk to most accounting firms and regulators, right, whatever you're doing, because this is a subjective piece to it, document it so we can, you know, not only see the process today, but hopefully it kind of mirrors what you've been doing in the past, and then we'll do moving forward. Steve, anything you want to add here?
Nope, that was
okay.
Nope.
All right. You know, this is just an example of ways you might do it, right? You can just, you can incorporate or rank or kind of weight, you know, some of those Q factors. You can look at them independently and just apply them to the entire portfolio. So again, you know, this is an area, if you're looking for, you know, any, you know, assistance, you know, we're happy to look at what you're doing today. and offer any thoughts on it, but also why in these future coffee talks, we're going to bring in more viewpoints on this, because again, I think it is a kind of a unique piece to the puzzle, and one that's, really your unique piece to the puzzle. And so we don't want to necessarily prescribe how you should do it, but we will certainly share what we see and what we hear and what we think you could or may not want to do with those Q factors. So again, next month we'll bring on a partner from an accounting firm, and they'll share their thoughts on Q factors as well. Okay, so those are the topics that we wanted to touch on. Just a reminder, again, we are in a little bit of a different format. Many of you already submitted questions or chats or raised your hand, and we'll call on you. You can ask your question aloud. Just a reminder, we do have a mix of over the 100 people attending today, of people who are first-time attendees to our coffee talks. We thank many of you who are here on a repeat visit. They are designed to attend each month, but we do want to recognize, and we try to tailor the content to balance, both introductory information and kind of ongoing information. So I'm going to check this chat here. The question is regarding the slides after the meeting. Yes, I apologize. We will send out an email. It may be later today or more likely on Monday with an email that will contain both the slide deck and a link to the recording to today's presentation. Anything else that's on your mind, go ahead and please submit those questions now. I also just give you a reminder, we do have another coffee talk scheduled for March 11th. At that time, again, we will have an accounting firm join us to talk about Q factors. If this is your first introduction to the CECLSolver, Steve will be doing a more in-depth demonstration of our actual tool on February 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern. So you can register for that online. You can register for it at QuickRate, and you can get a much more in-depth discussion of our CECLSolver. You can always at any time reach out to David or Jason, or just click on our website to schedule a demo of your information, and we can do it one-on-one with you as well. Again, we want to make this process as seamless and as anxiety-free as we possibly can do, and so we're attempting to address this in a multiple of ways. A couple of other questions that have come on. Let's see. Can you go over the limits on the call report, which is quarterly versus the need to do ALLL monthly? How do you mitigate that portion? Again, I think a couple of things, and Steve, I'll let you take a run at this as well. So again, I think for many of you, the majority are doing something quarterly is sufficient. If you want to do your analysis monthly, a couple of practical things. Your warms will probably not change month to month very much. They practically won't change much quarter to quarter, so that's not an issue. You can update your numbers if you want to use monthly numbers in our CECLSolver. So you do have the ability to tackle that whichever way you'd like. Steve, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, while we get that whole universe of peer historical loss data updated, obviously on a quarterly basis, whenever everyone's done filing those call reports with a 1 month lag, it doesn't limit how often you can run the tool or when you can run it as of. If you want to do it on a monthly basis, or if you wanted to run it sort of intra-quarterly, so to speak, all you have to do, if you can scroll back up to the first, all you have to do is update the balances, the current balances that you see there, about 2/3 of the way over on the right. There's a column that by default will be the most recent quarterly data that's updated as soon as you file. But if you haven't filed yet, or again, it's during the middle of the quarter, you can just take your numbers from the GL, override those quarter end balances, and you'll get, and the report will be as of, the CECL calculation will be as of whatever date you plug in those balances. And if you had any if the industry had any very significant change in conditions between when the last quarterly peer data was available and this intra-quarterly run, that's something that we would manage through our qualitative factor adjustments, right? That's, while it's part of the historical record, it's not yet really even part of the public historical record. So instead of being part of our long-term multi-year historical trends, it's really what would be described as a current condition change. And that's what the definition of qualitative factors are. Qualitative factors are current and future conditions. So you'd have a current condition Q factor adjustment if you saw something that was significant enough in the environment around you to make you feel like you needed to adjust your CECL reserves. John?
All right, thank you. We had a question, looking to run parallel with our incurred loss model very soon. Does QuickRate have a comparison tool comparing present day ALLL expenses and estimated funding expenses under CECL? So yes, we do. Actually, on this slide, you can see, if my screen was in the way, let me move this out of the way. We capture what your current reserve is here, and then allow you to compare it. So that is one feature that we've built in there, that you can quickly compare what you're currently showing as of the most recent call report filing, and then what the CECLSolver would calculate. Steve, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, and the peer data and the peer number as well. So we start by calculating the reserve under CECL. Then we show you what your current reserve is on a dollar and a percentage basis. And then we show you what your peers currently is. And then we show you what surplus or shortfall you have compared to the CECL requirement that we calculated above.
Great. Question on, what are we required to give our board of directors for review? Again, I think this is gonna, vary obviously, with every institution, how much or how little you want to share with the credit union or the board. Obviously, they need to be familiar with the methodology and the process being used. But we do have, again, as part of this, let me see if I can, an export button here. You can see that everything you see in our tool on the interactive pages, you can produce either in summary or detail to share with your board, with your auditors, with your regulators. So it's really kind of a unique choice again, besides the adoption process of how much you're going to share with the board on an ongoing basis. Steve, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, you probably, when you choose the export for your board, you might just choose to export the summary and maybe some of the economic trends or historical. Whereas if you're exporting it and sending it to your auditor, I'm sure they're going to want all the granular nitty gritty historical loss rate details. So you have full control over how much you export and what format you export it in. If you want PDF or if you want an Excel export that you can cut and slice and dice and tweak even more and then print out depending upon your audience.
Oh, great. Thanks, Steve. There's a question. Has there been a chat to if it's appropriate to adjust the look back period versus the Q factor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question has to do with, and this is not something you can see on this slide, but when you go to the historical analysis tab, that's where we have detailed all your long-term loss trends, right? Your balances and how they've changed by segment, your charge-offs and recoveries going back, 15 years by segment. And but we don't use all of that data, right? One of the tenets of CECL is you're supposed to choose what you believe, of course, subjectively, right? What is an appropriate look back period to use when evaluating your historical experience and then using that as your baseline to project forward. We start by default by using your WARM. So your weighted average remaining maturity, it lets us know how long these loans that you have typically last or typically live, right? And we use that as our guide for to determine look back periods to start with. However, we do give you some flexibility there. If you don't think, let's say the remaining life of your mortgage loans with some prepayment assumptions is 6 years, should we be looking at the most recent 6 years, like 2016 through 2022, or should we be looking at 2009 to 2015? Which 6-year durational period is the most appropriate to use for CECL? We default by using the most recent. Typically, if there's no good reason to not have your most recent data be your guide, it should be your guide. But there are situations where that's not appropriate. So we allow you to take that whole 6-year look back period and shift it back to an earlier period. If A, you think it's more appropriate, or B, you just kind of want to stress it a little bit more, right? If we take a very benign period with no losses, bring it back to 2009 to 2013, where you did have some losses, what you're really saying there is I'm expecting losses going forward to be more like they were during the last recession, because, and so you're actively saying, I expect some ugly economic times to come when it comes to my mortgage loans. And so instead of dealing with it by Q factoring it, by adding a large positive Q factor, you're getting that reserve up by shifting your look back period to a more stressful historical time frame. It's I don't want to say it's 6 1 half dozen of the other. There are two different ways to manage the same thing. You know, you're making an argument that you have to defend. Whichever way you think is the most rational way to do it, they're both just as equally potentially appropriate. But you would want to make sure that you make some notes for the segments, you know, detailing that instead of increasing qualitative factors, we thought the last recession was a better guide for our expectations moving forward. So we shifted a look back period instead. Two ways to skin that cat. Good question.
Yeah, good question. Like I said, if nothing else, it's there, as Steve said, just for context and reference too, even if you try to use the default period. Kathy, thank you for the comment. She's been running the CECLSolver since January of 2021. Her board appreciates having the data monthly to better watch the changes over time. So just as an FYI to the group, thank you for putting that.
Hey, Kathy.
Yep. Is there a credit union asset minimum for implementing CECL or required for all credit unions to use? I believe the number was 5 million or was 10. It
10 million.
Yeah. Yep. That did have a safe harbor provision that they did not have to implement.
And that was that last on our resources tab there's a link to not only some internal resources, but also some of the better presentations we've seen by the various regulators and FASB and NCUA. And they put out a document in July of last year, which was very dry and very boring and about 50 pages long. It looked like a Word document that somebody had PDF'd. It was, in my opinion, sort of their official capitulation that CECL's happening. It's happening for almost all of us, and it's happening on the timeline that we've been talking about for a while now. We're not kicking the can down the road, or we don't expect them to any further. The silver lining, small as it may be, in that document was that they said, well, we couldn't carve out credit unions as a whole. For the absolute smallest credit unions, for those of you under $10 million in total assets, what they're going to do is they're going to say, for you, your loan loss reserve no longer, we will not require your reserve to meet GAAP standards anymore once CECL is implemented. So, you know, they're not, so it was a carve out for just 10 million and under. However, so while you might not need to use CECL or be required to, I would still posit that if this tool is simpler and easier to use than what you're doing now, or it provides a result that's more in line with your examiner's expectation or where you'd hope to be or land from reserves, there's still no reason you couldn't use it. You just don't have to use it if you're really small.
Great. Thanks, Steve. A couple more. Question, just to be sure, if we've done nothing to get ready for CECL to this point, this model will work correct? The answer is absolutely yes. I mean, I think you are not alone. You know, I would say that there's probably better than half. I would think the institutions are still just getting going on that. So yes, we can work with you. And again, I think it's one of the advantages that we have with our tool, that we have all the information kind of preloaded for you, so we can make this transition very, very seamless for you. Steve, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I hate to sound cheesy about it, but getting you going for the first time is what happens the second you log into the tool. We've already pulled all that historical data. We've looked at timelines and look back periods. We've suggested external peer data that you can use for your Q factors. So it really gets you ramped up and ready to you can go from zero to defending it to an examiner within a few days, honestly. And that's what our tool was designed to do, because the warm method and our adaptation of it is pretty straightforward. And our take on it is, so it doesn't have to be rocket science, and even a lot of the subjective parts of it don't have to be that different from what you've already been doing.
Great. The next question is, if this is pulling call report data, is there usually a lag between data updates as the NCUA gets them updates? So we've made some improvements there. Steve, I'll let you take that one.
Sure. So yeah, the universe, everyone's file, let's use some actual dates here, right? 12/31 data, everyone has to have their call report filed by the end of January. Our tool will update the entire universe of peer data pretty much the first on February 1st or 2nd. So the first couple days after that first month, when the NCUA is getting all that data, we're getting it every day. So we link with the NCUA's databases every single night. And whenever a credit union files a call report, we get their information immediately now within the day. And so your data, your balance data you'll be able to get that updated as soon as you file. As far as that long-term historical analysis, where we're looking at the quarterly trends going back forever, that will get updated in one big chunk, but it's not months after the quarter end. It's pretty much exactly 1 month after the quarter end. Once all the call reports are due, we update it then. That we don't do on an incremental basis for a very important reason. If you're running this, let's say you filed your call report early on January 15th, and you want to run everything as of then because you got your new data, you're rearing to go, and then you find that, oh, the peer data is months in arrears at this point. Well, there's a very good reason for that, and that is if we updated the peer data in real time, then your peer group would be a very, very small fraction of your actual peer group. You know, if there's 500 credit unions in your state and only 3 of them have filed by the 15th, and you're one of them, it wouldn't be very appropriate peer data to use the 3 that have filed as opposed to the 500 that will over the next couple of weeks. So the incremental nature is on your data, not on your peers. And I think that's important, or people forget about that and make some big mistakes, and they'll run the tool a week later and everything will look totally different because now 500 more credit unions have filed. So we want to make sure we're careful with when we update the peer data as quickly as possible, but as complete as possible. Hope that makes sense.
It does, Stephen. I think it's a good point just to point out the probably 50 to 60% of the institutions filed the last week. So to just or to reiterate Steve's point.
Or more. Yeah, I'd say 80.
More, yeah. Hi there. My credit union is trying to gather basic level information on CECL implementation. Do you have any preferred resources for this? Sure. I mean, not to be, I would say us, but we also up here in the top right on our CECLSolver page, we've chronicled a lot of the interagency presentations on this. And so again, I think between, a demo with us and, utilizing those links on there for the information from the agencies, from FASB, just the industry at large, I think you'll get just about all the necessary information you want about CECL. But again, we're happy to kind of walk you through that, review your situation if you are interested. Whoops. All right, so let me keep moving. We got a few more questions here. All right, can we make an appointment to someone to walk us through the very first time we use the method? Absolutely. I'm going to get to the page where, again, you can reach out to us. You can, go to our website and do it, but you can also just email us at info@quickrate.com, and you can get an appointment scheduled. We'd welcome the opportunity to do that. So thank you for the question. All right, using the QuickRate tool, I adjusted some assumptions as of 9:30. Opening the tool now at 12/31 data. The prior average lives assumption reverted back to 3 years across the board. Is there a way to keep the assumption static once set between?
Yeah, let me take that. You might want to contact us for if you're confused or not confused, but if you want some more clarification on that. But to answer the question, the way it should work, if you open up the tool, every time you open it, you come to a default scenario, right? None of your old data is saved. All the financial data is updated to the most recent quarter. It's as if you had never opened it before. As soon as, if you want to modify an old scenario, let's say you built a scenario for 9:30, not only did you have warrants in there, but you had detailed notes on qualitative factor adjustments and all that good stuff. And you just want to open up that old scenario from 9:30 and just push the historical data forward a quarter. So it's taking into account 12/31. You open the old scenario, and then you go to the historical analysis tab, and then you shift the look back periods to include 12/31. And you'll see that there's a small period where they're not including that fourth quarter. You shift it so that they can. When you shift the look back periods on an old scenario, that brings the old scenario into the current, so to speak, as far as the data is concerned, without losing any of the inputs that you had for WARMs or individually assessed loans or Q factors or anything else. So hopefully that answers the question. If you're opening an old scenario and it's clearing your WARMs out when you update something else, it shouldn't be functioning that way. And please contact us individually so we can work through that. Sometimes there's browser refreshing issues and stuff like that.
But it's actually a great question, and I think something we'll tackle in a future coffee talk. We'll just talk about moving those quarter to quarter things. It's probably a really good thing, Steve, where we could just kind of screenshot that for people to see.
Talk about we'll have a greater discussions about look back periods, honestly, in general. And it's something that we've identified some potential future enhancements as well, giving you guys some more customization over your look back periods, which would involve a little bit more math. But we're actively working on that as well.
Yeah, but I think that's a really good question, Brett. Thank you. That we'll again kind of tackle quarter to quarter when you come in and what you see and how to kind of move scenario or move your analysis forward a quarter. So thank you for that question. And like I said, I'm going to make a note to address that in a future coffee talk. Okay, so thank you for those questions. All right, I apologize. I'm going to scroll through these to get to the end again. Just a reminder, we will have another coffee talk in March. We thank you all for attending today. I think I've gotten to all the questions. Steve and I certainly appreciate those. Again, if this is your first introduction to the CECLSolver, Steve will be doing a much more detailed presentation of the tool itself on February 22nd. And then as the question came through, if you want to schedule something with your data and just do a one-on-one, you can email us at info@quickrate.com and we will get something scheduled and take you through your information. So again, thank you all very much for taking time out today to learn, to join our presentation. Appreciate all the questions. I hope you found it helpful. A reminder, we will send an email out probably on Monday with a link to the recording and the slide deck today. And then in the interim, if you have any questions, reach out to us or reach out to customer service and we will get your questions addressed. But again, our goal is to make sure this is a painless transition to CECL, and we think the CECLSolver can help you do that. So thank you again for your time today. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay warm, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye now. Oh,
thanks, everybody.
One more came in. Oh.
No,
thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
That's awesome. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Bye now.